Hey, thanks for checking out my channel. I'm Tom Neiman, and today we're going to do a painting with charcoal. That looks like what you see up on screen right there. One of my favorite mediums, charcoal, because it's very much like painting in as far as how you can get the effects associated with your drawings. And at the same time, it's a lot easier to set up, clean up, and also manipulate. Much simpler when you don't have to deal with colors and only focus on values. We're going to start by covering this entire sheet of paper that I have taped to my wall with a layer of charcoal. I'm specifically using a broken stick of burnt willow charcoal, which is a little bit lighter. And I'm going to use my blending nub here to work that into every nook and cranny of the painting. And the type of image that we're creating today falls in line with the vanitas and memento mori painting tradition. Cezanne, whose painting I just put up on screen, and I'm going to put another one of his, he did quite a few of these up on screen, tackled these sorts of paintings. These are still life paintings where the artist would, in many instances, particularly back in the day, in a traditional sense, arrange a still life using a skull and a candle and other artifacts, perhaps maybe a book or some other type of artifact. And these particular still lifes were intended to provide symbolic meaning, conveying the transient nature of earthly life. And their symbolism is obvious in some ways and not so much in others. The skull represents death, while the candles represent life's brevity, fragility, and the passage of time. And you'll see other examples if you just Google famous skull paintings with candles. You'll get all kinds of results. So today we're working with an inexpensive paper. It is a relatively smooth surface, acid-free, Master's Touch, 17 by 14 inch, 80-pound cold pressed paper. And we'll put an image of it up on screen right here. In addition to that, we're going to use various tools, including our malleable eraser, a regular white hard rubber eraser. We're going to use the burnt willow charcoal, along with some compressed charcoal as well. We're going to tackle this drawing today using multiple reference photos and also using some of the principles associated with drawing the head and hands by Andrew Loomis. Right now I'm actually using the ball and plane method mostly to get the skull image roughly right, mostly from memory. So we'll have other videos on the channel in the coming weeks and months that will describe that a little bit further, specifically with regards to how to go about drawing a skull, a human skull. Right now we're just laying in some different shapes. The good news is with charcoal, we're focused almost exclusively on values, lights versus darks in the image. It simplifies the process. It's also going to help us bring some major drama into this image. And we're just going to work our way through right now, have the shape of the skull roughed in, some of the bigger shapes within that shape itself. Going to add a shape indicating the candle and where that's going to sit plugged into the top of the cranium here. And we'll just keep making progress along the way. Here's some more detail about the paper I'm using today. It's paper taken out of a drawing pad from Master's Touch. 17 by 14 inches, 80 pounds. Now I'm going to rough in some of the negative shapes. This is just like oil painting when you add the use of negative shapes, cutting those in, whether it be sky holes in a tree or into massive clouds or what have you. This feels the same way when using charcoal in this manner. So we're just going to intensify the darkness there. Behind the skull and a little bit in the shadow areas, much again like oil painting, adding or focusing in on the shadow patterns themselves. I'm using my blending stick to smooth out some of these colors and move it around a little bit on the paper here. Once again, much like when painting on plein air in watercolor or oil, it is very helpful to move around the entire image and work on areas throughout the entire surface of the painting. Very much is the same when working in charcoal in most instances. You don't want to focus too much on one area and concentrate there for too long. And I'm putting up on screen right now one of the reference photos that I'm using to complete this drawing, this charcoal drawing. And it's intended just to be that, a reference. I took some existing images, manipulated them in photo editing software. And my intention here was just to provide a demonstration of how someone might tackle this sort of still life scene using charcoal exclusively. And as mentioned earlier, I'm using both compressed charcoal and burnt willow charcoal. So while you might be familiar with the differences between those two, a lot of folks share with me that they're not. So I'm just going to provide some details that might help you understand how and why I'm using these two types of charcoal. Burnt willow charcoal is a soft, natural drawing tool that's made from scorched willow branches. It's excellent for light sketches, tonal work, and delicate shading due to the ease of erasing and smudging. In contrast, compressed charcoal is a denser stick of powdered charcoal mixed with a binder, producing much darker, bolder lines and deep blacks that are more permanent and require more effort to erase. So those areas in the eye sockets and in the hole in the skull where the nose is and the background those areas were sketched out using primarily compressed charcoal, which once again is much darker and more difficult to erase. And there will be times inevitably when creating a drawing like this where you have to erase or try and move the charcoal around. So you'll see multiple examples of that throughout this demonstration here. Right now I am touching some things up with my malleable eraser, and it's very, very useful when lightening up areas that are covered with the burnt willow charcoal. It becomes a little bit more difficult to use the malleable eraser when you're trying to take some of the compressed charcoal off. Typically, when you're trying to erase the compressed charcoal marks, you will need to use a conventional rubber eraser, and I'll be using that today here too. So we're to the point now where all of the major shapes are in, and much of the values, the limited value range is in. The lights and the darks as they will be and will appear in the final drawing are very much in place. It's a matter of refining from here on out and adjusting and modulating the values. There are some areas that need to be approached with a little bit more sensitivity, need to be made lighter. Other areas we need to reinforce their darkness. Some areas need to be reshaped, but for the most part, this is where we are right now at this stage, going to give you a sense for what this drawing is going to look like, especially with the last few marks that I put in, indicating here what the shadows are going to look like, the cast shadows are going to look like within this drawing. And it's just going to be a process of pausing from time to time, stepping back and making sure that what we have drafted here makes sense. We're not aiming for perfection. We're not aiming to create a masterpiece here by any stretch of the imagination. We're definitely not aiming to make this an anatomically correct drawing. What we're hoping to do when it comes to what we're aiming at, what we're aiming to accomplish with this drawing is to evoke emotion, to actually provoke people to think when they look at this drawing, what it might mean. Everybody will infer their own interpretation, and that's completely fine. From my standpoint, personally, I really, really like the symbolism that's associated with those old paintings that we discussed earlier, done by Cezanne and others. The symbolism associated with life and death, the fact that life really is brief, life itself is fragile. And in addition to that, many of us will sustain small deaths, lesser deaths throughout our lifetime when we change roles, when we move from one phase to another. So I love that symbolism. It's just a fun thing to do. So we're going to continue making our way through this drawing here. And you'll see I'll use my blending stick. Right now I'm focused on evening out some of the darker values in that background space. In some cases, I'm going to lose the lines in the drawing, much like you would with an oil painting. We're going to make sure that we take some care to thoughtfully approach the use of the lines that divide each of the major shapes, such that in areas where a cleaner, more intense line will serve the painting, we will look to leave those. And in areas where we need a softer edge or a blurred line in order to serve the painting, we'll make the effort to take the care to do that as well. And some of those, for example, will include the edges of the shadows, the table that the skull is sitting on toward the background. And in some of the areas where you might have multiple light sources casting multiple shadows in some of the notches within the eye sockets, down by the teeth and lower part of the upper jawbone, and so on and so forth. Those are areas where we might have the use of suggestion, less drafting, less illustrating, more suggesting. Once again, just like you would do with a painting. I can't emphasize this enough. That's why I find using charcoal to create pieces like this to be such a fun medium. Now, what I'm going to do is just make my way around this drawing and continue to focus on the effect I want this drawing to convey. I want it to be eerie. I want it to be thought-provoking. I want it to be filled with drama. And I really, right now, am liking how the candlelight itself is clearly appearing to be the light source, the primary light source. It's the most intense lighter value in the drawing. And that illusion is just a byproduct of the fact that you have that little intense light spot within the largest dark area within the drawing. So seems like it should be trickier to create that illusion than it actually is. And I'm tinkering with the scale and the shapes that make up the eye sockets and the nose hole. And that nose hole is going to give me a little bit of trouble. I can feel it right now. Maybe made it a little bit too large. In addition to that, want to work on enhancing the illusion of the three-dimensionality associated with the bridge of the nose, so the face does not appear to be too flat. So I'm working on that right now by taking some of that charcoal off using my eraser. And we'll keep on keeping on here with this drawing. We should wrap up within about 30 minutes or so. But I'm liking where we're at right now. It's in pretty good shape. And I think we can get it to a point where this might be something I would like to have hanging on my wall, even though it's a little eerie and a little spooky. In my painting practice, in my art practice, I tend to focus on beautiful nature scenes. So this is a little bit of a departure from what I normally would do. But once again, kind of paying homage to some of the greats of the past. And I know that I've mentioned Cezanne a bunch of times, but there's other folks like Pieter Claes, there's Gerhard Richter, Max Beckmann, and many, many others that have focused on this particular theme, the memento mori and vanitas. So, this is not original by any stretch. It's not an original idea. The considerations of the symbolism are not original either, nor is the use of charcoal to create this scene. I've seen many, many other artists throughout history and contemporaries who have done this. So just a little exercise I thought I'd share on my channel. Hopefully you're having fun. If you have questions, feel free to let me know about the approach, the materials. I'll try to include some notes about all those details when we publish this video as well. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help address any questions that you might have. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep working. At this point, it's just a matter of putting charcoal on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off, modulating lights and darks, and fixing things that I recognize are not quite right. Right now, you can see the way that the eye sockets are set up. They're a little off. The eye socket on from your perspective as the viewer on the left or on the right of the skull itself is a little off. So we're going to continue to make adjustments to make sure that the proportions and the perspective kind of look correct. Not looking to be correct scientifically, anatomically, or even from an academic drafting standpoint. Once again, just working to create an image that evokes those feelings, those eerie feelings associated with this sort of still life. Eeriness, symbolism related to the frailty of life, and so on and so forth. Up until this point, I've been using my blending stump, which is also known as a tortillon or tortillons in plural. These are tools that are used for smudging and blending charcoal, graphite, and other drawing medium. And they're really, really helpful. They're made of tightly rolled paper. They typically are shaped to include a point on the end for detailed work and a blunt end for larger areas. Blending stumps offer a more controlled and cleaner alternative to using your fingers for blending. And in addition to that, they help you achieve smooth gradations and subtle shading effects, all while avoiding transferring the oils from our skin, what happens when we use our fingers. And the reason why that's a big advantage is because when we use our fingers to blend, we might get really great effects, but we also shift the potential for our drawings, because when that oil mixes in with the media that we're using and the paper, sometimes it'll make it more difficult to erase or further manipulate the charcoal in this instance. So up until the very end here, I'm going to use my blending stump as often as I can. And as you just saw, I'm starting to, because we're getting to the tail end here, I'm starting to use my fingers from time to time when I know that only with my fingers can I create a desired effect. So in this case, some of the subtleties associated with the bones that make up this skull, also in instances where we might have wax that's dripped down the skull from the candle, there are opportunities for me to create effects that I can only do with my fingertips. I also like I like the idea of having that contact between my fingertips and the artwork that I'm creating. Even in some cases, fingerprints themselves appearing and disappearing, and that's a wonderful thing. But the key is you want to put that off to the very end if you choose to do that, because once again, the oils transferred from our fingertips and our hands to the paper and in mixing in with the media that we're working with, in this case charcoal, can have negative consequences. So we want to save that for the very end.